Alright, welcome back to the channel. So today I'm going to be doing a tournament report for YCS Niagara. I haven't really done this type of video before, but I saw that Oscar does them on his channel. Shout out to him. Legacy Retro Formats. And I like the idea of just talking by myself about my experience, my Swiss rounds, all that stuff. So I did make a deep run. I got third place, and I'll just go through quickly with like the Swiss rounds and stuff like that. But before we do that, there are a couple things I do want to discuss. The first being how I feel about Hero Frogs versus Dream Frogs and Frog Monarchs. So if you've been listening to the podcast or you just heard me talking with other top players, you know that I took about a month and a half off of playing Hero Frogs to try out things like Dream Frogs and Frog Monarchs, or Stun Frog Monarchs, whatever you want to call it. And I did use those decks in online tournaments where I did have success. I topped both of them, but my experience wasn't a smooth one, I would say, with those two decks. Like when I played Dream Frogs, I went against 4 Blackwing decks, which I think is definitely one of the worst matchups, and the deck felt very fragile. Like DDV is way stronger against Dream Frogs, I would say, because your game plan does rely on you dupe blocking your opponent over and over. If you don't open Treeborn Frog access, the deck feels really bad. And the same thing is exactly true for like Stun Frog Monarchs as well, maybe even to a greater extent, because the Stun Frog Monarch decks tend to not play salvages or pot of avarice or anything like that, so their game plan comes down to literally monarching your opponent every single turn or summoning Lad or whatnot. And while I do think that those game plans can be good against certain matchups like Value Turbo, it's very linear and limited against some of the other scarier decks in the format. I also felt like both of these decks, when I played them versus Hero Frogs, like I had to go against Daime and a couple other of the top frog players online, and when they were playing Hero Frogs, I just felt like my deck could not push as hard as theirs could. Like Absolute Zero is literally one of the biggest problems in the mirror match. It is essentially a turn skip, I feel like, because your best play is to basically monarch it and then you're passing, and you can't do anything after that. You summon a monarch, you clear the Absolute Zero, but then your field gets destroyed, so you have to pass with an open field, and then they can do more things to you. So I really did not like that dynamic. Also, I think that if we're talking about in real life events specifically, where you have a 45-minute timer, Hero Frogs has an incredible strength in the amount of damage it can do in one turn. Like one of my opponents passed to me, we'll talk about that in the Swiss rounds report, but he passed me with an open field essentially, and I went summon Infernal Prodigy, summon Substitute, Tribute, summon out Swap Frog, send a water monster, activate Miracle Fusion, and attacked him for 1,000, 3,500, and 100. So right there, that's 4,600 damage out of nowhere, and that's something that really only Hero Frogs can do. It also has incredible comeback factor because of Miracle Fusion, and I think overall it's just less weak to things like Mask or Restrict, which is really good against Dream Frogs and Frog Monarchs. Because when you think about it, what does Mask or Restrict do to an Absolute Zero, right? Like it doesn't do a single thing to Miracle Fusion. And the same is true for cards like Pulling a Rug. Neither of those cards do anything to Miracle Fusion. So I like the strength that Hero Frogs has to basically play through side deck hate a little bit better. It's not as susceptible to things like DD Crow either, because it's not as reliant on Treeborn Frog. I like the beatdown aspect of the deck, where Stratos and Alias are in it, so you can kind of just go into that mode. And if you ask my opponents, a lot of them can tell you that most of my games were won because of just like Stratos, Alias, Malicious Edge beatdown. Like not literally that, but what I'm saying is things like this will happen. I won't have Treeborn Frog access, but I'll have an E-Call. I'll get dust shooted, and then they'll see my hand, they'll put back like a Dupe Frog or something. I remember specifically this happened where I had a Dupe Frog and nothing else in my hand in terms of monsters. I had a bunch of other spells and traps and a Dupe Frog, so he trapped dust shooted me, put back Dupe Frog, and then I played E-Call, got Stratos on his open field, searched Alias, attack for 18, set Mirror Force pass, he's like summon Sirocco, attack, I Mirror Force, I draw, summon Alias, attack, now you take an 18, 18, 19, and all of a sudden, your life points are extremely low against the deck that is still playing triple Miracle Fusion, triple Kayas, Econs, Brain, all that stuff. So like, it's very easy to win the game from that point when I've already beat you down with the most basic part of my deck. And I do like in simplified game states how good Stratos is and Alias and all that stuff. Like they're very good when the game is simplified. When your opponent's on low card resources and stuff like that, like Stratos is so nuts. There's just a consistency that I really enjoy having when you're playing with Stratos in your deck, because 3 Stratos plus the 80% chance to open up Treeborn Frog is extremely strong. And after game 1, your deck is still very strong because those cards are good against Fossil Dyna, and then, you know, Mask or Restrict doesn't do a single thing to like Stratos beatdown, Alias beatdown, or whatnot. So yeah, if you were asking me, what do I think is a better deck between Hero Frogs, Dream Frogs, and Frog Monarchs and all of that, I think the answer is Hero Frogs is still the best out of all the Frog Frog decks that I've played so far, and last month and a half just kind of proved that to me. Like, I know that the other decks have seen success, but I think Hero Frogs not only has, if we're going by results, Hero Frogs does have more results. The Undefeated from Sacramento and the Undefeated from YCS Niagara were both playing Hero Frogs. There were 2 Hero Frog decks in top 4 of YCS Niagara, and overall it's just like won more tournaments, but not even being results oriented too. I think that the feeling of the decks, while I do think that the other ones do have their strengths, I think that their weaknesses games 2 and 3 are more apparent, and I like playing through people's side deck cards. I think that Frogs is one of the best game 1 decks in the format next to Dragon Turbo. Like, I think that those are the 2 strongest game 1 decks, but then like obviously both of those decks can suffer a lot from side deck hate, and Hero Frogs just fixes a lot of the anti-frog card side decks. Like, a lot of them just aren't good against Hero Frogs, or they are good in certain situations and awful in others, and that's kind of what I like. I like the catch-22 that you could have a Mask or a Strict that is good, or you could just be getting beat down by a Miracle Fusion Absolute Zero, and now your Mask or Strict looks terrible, or like pulling the rug, same thing. You could have Fossil Dyna, and that could be good, or I could just go summon Alias, attack over it, or summon Ocean, attack over it, or summon Stratos, attack over it, and you get the idea. And even when the deck loses Treeborn Frog, like if you Karma Cut both of them, or you like double DD Crow them or whatever, Hero Frogs can still just play the game without Treeborn Frog. So all of those strengths just make it, to me, the better deck. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is the current meta changes. So YCS Lille, I don't know how you say it, but the last one that happened in Europe, that one was won by Machina Control. And overall, I think that since the big 3 has been established, a lot of people have been working on gunning for those 3 decks, so Vayu, Blackwing, and Frogs. And we're seeing a strong meta shift towards anti-big 3, which I think is a good thing, because you don't want the format to actually just be 3 decks. Like, I think it's fine that other decks do well. There's a lot of tier 1.5 decks in the format. So we just saw Christia Sworn win an event. I think that was the first event that Christia Sworn has ever won. We've also had the Virus deck win Peak of the Beak 6, which was playing 3 copies of Deck Devastation Virus and also siding 3 Eradicator. We've had Monster Mash win. And so yeah, there's been a lot of other cool decks. Oh yeah, how could I forget? GB's won the Iados GB deck that won RBET New York. That was also what I would consider to be a deck that was geared towards beating the big 3, and he was able to accomplish that. So seeing 4 different decks win pretty much the last 4 tournaments or so in the format is a good sign, because I think that people will get bored if you kept seeing like Vayu and Frogs and Vayu and Frogs and the occasional Blackwing deck win every single event. Those decks are still topping a lot, but they're not winning every single tournament, and that is good, because the beginning of this year was literally just Vayu and Frogs, and now we're in the second half, and it seems to be shifting a little bit towards other decks that are, they've always been close. And like I said, this format is one of those where even the big 3, as strong as they are, they don't have like an 80-20 match up against the 1.5 decks. It's not like that. Like, you can lose to, like if I'm playing Hero Frogs, right, I can lose to literally any of the 1.5 tier decks. But yeah, I encourage people to play what they want and not necessarily just follow trends or whatever people tell you the meta is. Like, if you really believe in a deck, I think you should play it, and if you continue to work on the list and tweak it over and over again, you'll eventually come up with something that could be competitive and maybe even win a tournament. And with that being said, why don't we get into my Swiss round? So round 1, I played versus Blackwings. A longtime friend of mine, Manny from New York, and he was playing Blackwings. I won 2-1. I believe I won a die roll, and it was really simple game 1, like summon substitute turn 1, send, you know, swap, send Treeborn, bounce to hand, pass. And it kind of went back and forth game 1, but it got to a point where he had a Thought Ruler and another monster on the field, and I was able to go summon Ryza, spin back the Thought Ruler, brain control his other monster. I think it was Silverwind the Ascendant. He had like Silverwind and Thought Ruler in the field, and I spun back the Thought Ruler, brain controlled the Silverwind, and attack for game. And then game 2 he won, and then game 3 it came to he deck devied me, and it didn't really do anything, and then I just kind of won with beatdown, like a very simple beatdown plan from there. Round 2 I played versus GBs, and this guy, I remember when he sat down, he said, my friends told me to pretend like I do not know you, and he was like, but I don't give a fuck, I'm here because I wanted to meet some of these people, I want to play against some of these people that I've seen on YouTube. So he was a fan, and so were his friends, and we ended up playing. We had a good match. I won 2-0 because Soul Exchange plus Ryza on his Equest plus Chariot, which is broken. Like, he went a quest, get back Chariot, set it to the back row, and I remember saying to myself, like, if I draw one of my Soul Exchanges or if I draw a brain control here, I win. And then I ripped it, and I was like, all right, activate. This is game 2. After game 1 was like not even really a game, but game 2 was really close, and the Soul Exchange Ryza just sealed it. Round 3 I played versus Sizzle. You know, Rush Hour Podcast. We had to play each other in tournament again. So yeah, I won game 1. I won the die roll. I'm pretty sure I won game 1. And game 1 wasn't really like competitive at all. It was just one of those Frogs going first, and then, you know, you set a monster, you get Kai'd on your monster. You know, everything that could go wrong, basically, like when you're playing Vayu versus Frogs, happened to him. So I won game 1 really easily. Then game 2, I would say that he won pretty easily. In game 3, we were grinding. It got to a point where he set like 3 or 4 back row, and I didn't have Heavy Storm. And basically the whole game came down to like, if I have Heavy Storm, I win, but I didn't have it. And so I got oppressed and like Mirror Force and all that stuff, and I just lost the game. But it was definitely well played by Sizzle. So yeah, round 4, I played versus Zombies 2-0. I don't think there was anything like super important to remember about this match. Zombies is a deck that I'm really comfortable playing against. As long as I don't die, I feel like I'll always win with inevitability against this deck. Like they will eventually try to go for a big push, and he did. I believe I battle faded him or gorsed him and just came back. Like he did the Brio Goyo thing, used a bunch of cards to do it, and then like attacked me for 51. He got reversaled, and I feel like once you break their board, once you break that push, I'm not losing from there. So that's kind of what happened. And in game 2, I remember wasn't even really like, I don't even think he did all of that. Game 2, it was kind of one of those weird zombie hands with like Zombie Master and stuff like that, and you just kind of lose to like Stratos Alias. Round 5, I play against my friend Jason, aka ChefTaku from Chicago, also a big friend of Sizzles and Chai Teas, and he was playing the deck that Dominique Roberts has been playing in my Discord server, and winning pretty much every tournament he's played in with this damn deck, this Vayu Twilight deck that's like 45 cards. I believe his was 43 though. And yeah, I was really nervous because I had already lost to Sizzle, who's from Chicago, and I didn't want to also lose to Jason, who's from Chicago, because of a little side story that we had. So I was like, yeah, I was really nervous with going into this round, but I ended up winning it 2-0. And like, he was the guy who dust sheeted me and saw my hand had like Dupe Frog and a bunch of spells and traps, and then he literally made a verbal like confirmation that he was not happy to see that my hand had the E-Call in it, because he was like, oof. And I was like, yeah, so I'm just gonna put this Dupe Frog back and I'm gonna activate E-Call, because he didn't have any other back rows. So I was like, I'm gonna activate E-Call like while I'm putting the Dupe Frog back and just search out Stratos, get Alias, and attack for 18. Anything after the 18? And he was like, no. And I was like, all right, set my back row pass, and like he drew, tried to do something, and I'm like, draw, summon Alias, attack, and the game just started falling apart very quickly. Because if I do that much damage without even using the real core of my deck, like that's just the most basic part of my deck, then it's really hard to win after that, because at some point the Miracle Fusions and the Monarchs and stuff like that will start to come down, and you're already so low, you won't survive the onslaught. Round 6 was against Hamster Echo Kai's Dragons. I talked to this guy a lot. Shout out to him. I liked his list, but it didn't have enough in a side deck, in my opinion, for Frog. So I gave him some advice after the tournament was over. He asked me for help on Sunday, and I told him what he should be side decking against Frogs going forward, things that he could side in and out in the Hamster Echo Kai's Dragon deck, because he should have beat me for sure game 1. Basically, he ended up going Call It a Hornet to summon back Red Med. Red Med brought out a Wyvern, and then he attacked me for a lot of damage. On the following turn, I did like a play with Substitute where I made sub dupe dupe, and I passed, and then his 5-headed dragon came out on the next turn because he Future Fusioned me. So like the whole game, I got Future Fusion after he Gold Sarked for it. I couldn't answer it. And then 2 turns later, after my sub dupe dupe, the 5-headed comes out, but his field has 4 monsters on it. So it's a Reaper, 5-headed, a Red Med, and a Red Eyes Wyvern on the field. And I, like summon Stratos, I search out Malicious Edge, and I pass with the sub dupe dupe Stratos, and then on the following turn, I bring back Treatment Frog and I tribute it from Malicious Edge, and I start swinging on his Reaper for a shit ton of damage. So now he can't attack me, can't do anything with this crazy field he has. And I'm attacking him for like over 2,000 damage on Reaper in defense mode. And that made him go use Red Med's effect to summon Debris Dragon from the grave or from the hand, I forget which one. And then he made a Black Rose Dragon with the Spirit Reaper, blew up his whole field. I got both my Dupe Frog effects. And then I basically just outgrinded him from there, because then after that, I dropped the Miracle Fusion that I was holding because I didn't want to use it on the field that he had. So I was like, I'll just use this Miracle Fusion once he clears this, because I wasn't really afraid of dying. I kind of knew that his out was to do like Black Rose. I could see it. I'm pretty sure that the Debris Dragon was in the graveyard, so I could see that he could do this, but he was like, I do not want to lose all my cards like this. But eventually he committed to the play, and then yeah, I just came over the top. So I won game 1, and then game 2, it was the perfect example of drawing your cards after the fact. And when you're playing against Frogs, the side deck cards, while they can be really good, they can be so bad when you draw them after the fact. He drew Mask Restrict like after I did my Substo combo basically, and then like I Miracle Fusion and started attacking him, and that card doesn't do a single thing against 0, right? So like yeah, it was just one of those situations where Frog anti cards are just really ass a lot of the time, and that's why I like the deck. Round 7, 7, I played against the Value guy. Game 1, I was winning basically the whole game, and then he drew into something. I don't know what card he drew, but he drew into a way to OTK me basically with like a burial play, and he went for it, and I didn't have a Gores or Fader, and if I had a Gores or Fader, it was 100% game. And a lot of games do come down to just that, and I think he did the right thing, because if the game kept going the way it was going, the trajectory it was going at, I was just going to beat him. So like he OTK'd me out of nowhere, and then game 2 I won. Game 3, essentially he drew double pulling the rug. I read one of them that it could be pulling a rug, but the second one he had just set. So I went like summon Caius, and he pulling the rug, and then on the following turn he goes summon Plague Spreader Zombie, summon Silverwind the Ascendant, and he attacks me with both. And so my life points go from like 5,000, I take 32, so I'm at like 18 or something like that. And I draw for turn. I already have a second Caius in my hand, and I go to summon the second Caius, and he flips the second pulling the rug, and I was like, wow, that was very specific. So, and I remember the turn, there was a turn earlier like where he had 2 back row, and I unifrogged, and I ended up hitting bottomless trap hole. So basically if I had hit a pulling the rug instead, like I'd probably just win that round, but I ended up losing. So I thought that after losing to him in round 7, I was like, oh, I'm probably out the tournament now, because X2s don't usually top these events, or if they do, it's usually one guy who gets in at 8th place and that's it. So I went into round 8 just thinking like I'm not going to top, but I still played the round, but I was a little, kind of out of it, because I'm like, I think I just scrubbed out. And I played against Value again. I won game 1, and then game 2 he won, and then game 3 was really, really close. And essentially he could have won if he just said attack, but he summoned a monster into Torrential Tribute and just lost the game. And so yeah, I feel like he overthought the situation a little bit and ran into a really, really bad Torrential Tribute, and like as soon as he did it, he literally gave me a handshake. He was just like, yeah, that was bad. So after all the Swiss rounds, they start to post the actual standings. And as I'm walking over to it, my boy Chai T turns around and he points at me and he does like a thumbs up thing. And I looked at him and my eyes got really big. I was like, no way. And he was like, yeah, 7th. And I was like, I got 7th. And he was like, yeah. I was like, oh my God. And I like popped off the craziest. Like I never won anything in my life. Like I never topped anything in my entire life. I popped off so hard. Like literally, I'm pretty sure out of everyone in the tournament who saw the standings, I popped off the hardest, because 1, I just did not expect to make it. And then 2, yeah, I was just really happy. I was extremely happy to have gotten this top. I think this also puts me as the person having the most tops in Ultimate Time Wizard tournaments. I have 4 tops now. So yeah, I think that the only other person who has 3 was Rick Novak from Chicago. Me and him both had 3 tops, but now I have 4. And I didn't even get to play at Nationals, because you guys know what happened. I submitted my deck list late, and so I kind of didn't even get to play in that tournament. So I basically flew out to a tournament that I did not get to actually duel in. So that one doesn't count. Sacramento ran into some bad luck with a round 1 Vanity's Fiend game 1, and it just kind of rode out on me. And so yeah, there was some bad beat stories the last couple of events prior to Niagara. So this top meant a lot for me to just kind of get back on the horse. I've been topping online events a lot throughout the course of the last couple of months, but I really did want to top something in person again. So yeah, after all of these Swiss rounds, we went out to eat, like me, Chai, Jason, OG, Marcus, Hayden, Sizzle, Daniel LaMartina. There was a bunch of us. Like there was a shit ton of, if I'm missing anyone, I think Kevin Wu was there. Yeah, that table was super packed, and we talked for like hours. And just then we went to go see Niagara Falls, like, because where we were eating, it was directly next to, I guess, like a little bridge area where you could see the falls, and it had a really nice view. So we kind of went over to that for a little bit. And then yeah, the next day I found out that I was going to be playing against the Valhalla Fairy deck in top 8. So that guy had going X1. Shout out to him. His deck profile is on the channel. I was really nervous about this because 1, going X1 with that deck means that like his build is probably really good, and 2, I don't know how to play that matchup per se. It's not a matchup that I'm used to playing against, right? Like no one really plays that deck, so having experience against it is rare. The night before, I was talking to some of the people who had played against him, like my boy Televisual, who lost to him in the last round. They were both X1, and so Televisual lost. And I remember I sat next to them, so I saw his field was like Christia plus Shine Ball plus Imperial Iron Wall, and I was like, oh god, like that looks so crazy against Value. So I was really nervous. But when I actually played, it wasn't as bad as I thought, like mainly because he didn't summon Christia turn 1 with Valhalla. I think that if he did that specifically, like I'm in a really bad spot, obviously, but he didn't open up Valhalla Christia. So my deck was able to play, and I was able to win game 1 pretty easy. And then game 2, he creamed me. And then game 3 was really close, but I ended up pulling it out. And then top 4 was basically, I won game 1 against the zombie, the Teledad deck, like Teledad zombie, whatever you want to call it. I won game 1, and then game 2, I remember he had a teleport and a malicious in his hand, and he drew a lore and played a lore and drew mind control and plague spreader zombie, and like mind controlled my Caius and then summoned plague, synchroed, made a colossal fighter, attacked over my gores. I was in a really strong position. Like I basically was like, if you don't draw something right here, you lose. And like when he drew that, it was just the tempo. Like the duel went on for several turns after that, but like the tempo he gained from doing that play just, it ruined me. And then game 3 was the first game where I went into time the whole tournament. And yeah, that one was a little unfortunate because I feel like if I had a little bit more time, I actually win, but I had to basically, I didn't have enough time to do all the actions. Like I didn't want to, we just had an episode on time etiquette in the Rush Hour podcast. So I didn't want to start going crazy and just like throwing cards everywhere because it would require actions that are like from the graveyard, from the deck. And there was like a whole bunch of stuff, but essentially I could have won in time if I had more time. So that was the end of that. And then I had to play the top 4 playoff thing where one person gets third and an oversized rescue cat and the other person gets nothing. And I had to play against Dirk Wagner, who is a very good player from the past, who's topped several events. And he was also on Hero Frogs. Now he went undefeated in Swiss and he also won his top 8. So at this point he was 9-0. He had lost top 4s and I had to play me. Hero Frog mirror match. The mirror match it's good when both players have access to like the engine and, you know, no one bricked on Treeborn or something like that, or no one bricked on Heroes. It's not so good when one person draws the engine and the other person doesn't. Luckily for us though, we drew basically mirrors of each other's hands in games 1 and games 2. Like game 1, I went substitute, get swap, send Treeborn, bounce pass, and he went substitute, get swap, attack, you know, bounce pass, like sending his Treeborn as well, of course. And then I like started to, I think next turn I did a dupe block. I had another substitute, so I did a dupe block, and then he like brain control Caius my dupe block, and then I like Ryza in special summon swap, attacked him for 34. Then I bounced the Ryza back to my hand, and then he, you know, summoned his Caius that he drew again, and banished my swap frog, attacked him for 24. And then I basically killed him on the following turn. So we went back and forth for a little while, and then that was game 1. Game 2, he went Summon Stratos turn 1, pass search alias. He summoned Stratos search alias, and I went Summon Stratos search alias, and I crashed. And then he went summon alias attack for 19. Then I went summon alias attack for 19 over his alias, so they crashed. And then he went summon Kaiku, and I didn't have anything for it, and he just banished both my heroes. And I actually had a Miracle Fusion in my hand, so he banished both of my dudes. And then I remember having DD Assailant, and I had to set DD Assailant, and he tributed his Kaiku for Caius. So now he Caiuses my DD Assailant, attacks for 24. So now I've taken 19, 18, 2400. So I'm really low. I think I was around like 1900. And after the DD Assailant thing, basically it gets to a point where he summons an Ocean and attacks me directly, dropping me to 400. So now I'm dead to a Caius, I'm dead to a lot of things. But on the following turn, I tribute for Vanity's Fiend and I attack over his Ocean, and he never ever gets rid of his Vanity's Fiend. Like for the next several turns, he's just like setting monsters. I'm attacking face down Kaikus and I don't know, like swap frogs, whatever, like you name it. I'm attacking face down Infernal Prodigies, all types of shit. Eventually his life points get really low where he can't play a card like Brain Control anymore. So I felt a little bit more comfortable. And I remember he like dash shooted me. He saw that I had double Caius in my hand. So I did a play where, because I set DD Crow, because I had drawn DD Crow the turn prior and I set it next to the Vanity's Fiend, and he had dust shoot at me and saw double Caius and like brain control, but I'm at 400. So he puts back the Gores in my hand, which I don't think it mattered really, because one, sure, the Gores doesn't do anything. I'm not really sure why he put it back, but I think he just was kind of like whatever. But he put back the Gores and I had double Caius. I set brain control, then tributed the Crow, summoned Caius, banished the brain control, and then just attacked for a lot, and he conceded. And so yeah, I won that 2-0 and got the oversized rescue cat. And then that night I was at dinner with the same crew again, and I got a call that somebody wanted to buy the oversized rescue cat, and so I was like, yeah, like I'm down to sell it, and I got $1,000 for it. And I was like, all right, cool, that's done with. I don't have to worry about like, you know, moving that thing around or sending, you know, taking it back home with me. I did drive to Niagara though, so like if I did have to bring it back, it wouldn't have been that big of a deal because it's not the gigantic one. Like I wouldn't have to ship it to myself. But yeah, so I sold that, and that's pretty much the YCS Niagara tournament report. So let me know if you guys have any questions about anything, if you want me to go into detail about any other things that I talked about in this, because this video did cover more than just the tournament itself. But as you can see, I did play a lot of different decks. Like I did play against a lot of value. There's 4 value decks here, right? And I played against all the big 3. I played against Black Wings, 4 value. I played against Hero Frogs in the top 4 playoff thing. I played against a fairy deck, a Valhalla Fairy deck, GBs, zombies, dragons, Teledad, I guess. Like I played against a lot of different decks. But I think when we talk about the big 3, not only are those the decks that typically top and win the most, but it's also the decks that you will have to play against in a tournament. And I think pretty much everyone who did well played against the big 3, probably often too. Like I imagine other people's tournaments look similar to mine, maybe not as much value, but maybe you play more hero frogs or more dream frogs, or maybe you play more blackwings. So yeah, the format is still very diverse though. Anything can still pretty much win a tournament, which is good. But with all that being said, guys, I will catch you in the next one. Please leave a comment and I will see you later. Peace.